Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Heart and Soul. Today, I'm joined all the way from Minnesota via Zoom by Melissa Johnson, who is a therapist, a recovered eating disorder survivor. She's a Christian spiritual director, and she's the author of Soul Deep Beauty, which is, I'm assuming, a book,
Yeah,
devotional situation. And she's
yeah.
the host of the Impossible Beauty podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathryn.
I'm really excited. We actually, like, before we pressed record, we're already talking for like 15 minutes. So I have a feeling this is just going to be like an easy conversation.
I think
Um,
so.
and I'm also really excited, just like based off what I know of your story, for you to just dive a little deeper into that, because I know a lot of people first started listening to this podcast because of struggles with body image. And being that not only have you dealt with that in your own story, but also you're a professional therapist, it'll be nice to hear both like your story as well as like professionally how to like handle some of the battles that we go through every day.
Yeah, for sure.
So if you wouldn't mind, why don't we just start by you telling my listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. Yes. So I'm a marriage and family therapist here in Minnesota. I currently work at a practice where I see mostly like women 18 plus. I also teach at Bethel University, a course on soul well-being, essentially. And so that's a course with freshmen students. And then I also host the Impossible Beauty podcast, which is all about redefining beauty as the life of God at work in us and among us. And then my book, Soul Deep Beauty, my mind is blinking on the Still Deep Beauty is that released this past June, and that has been a newer part of my journey and an unexpected part of my journey. But I absolutely love having these conversations about redefining beauty because I think that it is so pertinent for the like our own soul's well-being as women. And I think we've just been sold what I call a broken brand of beauty that diminishes us and disintegrates us on so many levels. And so I love bringing awareness to this and also opening our hearts and our eyes to a new and renewed definition of beauty that actually brings about integration and wholeness in our lives.
I love that. So random, but Bethel University, is that the one in California, Redding, or not Redding, California?
So it's actually in Minnesota, but yes, there is the Bethel out in
Is
California
it the
as well. But
same or are they different?
it's really confusing because there is a Bethel does have the Bethel that's in Minnesota does have a campus in San Diego, a seminary campus, but I believe it is separate from like the
Okay.
Redding, California. Yes. Just to
Yeah,
make
that
it
is kind
really
of
confusing.
confusing. I was
Yes,
like, how are
yes.
you teaching at Bethel when you're in Minnesota?
Yes, yes. And I should clarify too, I don't know what happened to my brain, but my subtitle of my book is Fighting for Our True Worth in a World Demanding Flawless. So that's what I was pausing for to have my brain come up with my subtitle, which is crazy yeah,
Well,
that
you know
escaped my
what?
mind.
It got there. It got there.
It got there. It arrived. It arrived eventually. So yeah.
Okay, so what made you so passionate about this particular subject? I'm sure, or if you just wouldn't mind like sharing your story that led you to this place.
Yes, for sure. So, such a good question because it was so totally unexpected. So I was like, it's about like 9 years ago now. I was practicing as a therapist and also seeing my own therapist. And at that time, um, that therapist, she would give me these nudges from time to time, like, hey, I feel like to ask, inviting me to take a closer look at my relationship with exercise and also food. And to be totally honest, I thought that kind of what I was doing when it came to food and exercise was quote like good because I was kind of following the rules that our society gives us around like eating quote like good foods and clean foods and also our society when a diet culture also kind of upholds this idea of restriction, like the less food the better and the more
Yeah.
exercise the better. And so I really had gotten caught up in those narratives, and my therapist was seeing how it was really depleting my life in so many ways. And so she actually invited me to do some work around intensive eating disorder treatment, which for me was like, what are you talking about? Where is this coming from? I thought I was just trying to do it right. And long story short, I go into this a little bit more in the book, but I ended up pausing my work as a therapist to do intensive eating disorder work. And that ended up being like about a 9-month-ish journey, which was not what I expected. And totally, yeah, it was something that I was out of left field. And in the midst of that treatment experience, I started to notice that a lot of the beliefs and struggles and lies that were being believed inside the therapy rooms were actually the same beliefs and behaviors that were being engaged outside of the therapy rooms. And what I mean by that is I noticed that some of those, diet culture beliefs around how we define beauty and these ideas about, the less food, the better, the more exercise, the better. A lot of those messages were being believed outside of those therapy rooms in terms of like I see it in commercials, in my conversation with my friends and peers, and the magazines I would see at in the checkout aisle at Target, and just saw how inundated we are with this beauty that I actually think is like I said, disintegrating us in so many ways. And I couldn't not say something. Like I got out of the treatment experience and was like, oh my goodness, we are like, I think previous to my therapy experience, like my own intensive therapy experience, I would have been like, yeah, I mean, beauty standards, they're messed up, whatever. But I think that experience really helped open my eyes and my heart to see like, no, this is like literally killing some people, like
Yeah.
physically killing some people. But also I think that it is diminishing, I think, all women to some extent, who have been exposed to some of these Western beauty ideals and some of these diet culture related messages that come with them. And so after I got out of this treatment setting, I this book idea came to mind that is now called Soul Deep Beauty, and this was a long journey, even with that, with the publishing world and all of that. And it was never my like goal to be like I have to write a book. Like that wasn't what my life goal was or anything. It was like I had to write this book because it was so strong inside of me. Like, hey, we need to wake up. This is actually killing our souls, because I think what we believe about beauty matters because it helps define what we're moving toward. And so anyway, I also, on that path of moving toward publication, I also started the Impossible Beauty podcast, where I'm seeking to redefine beauty as the life of God at work in us and among us. And so that is a really long answer to why I'm so passionate about this and how I got to where I'm at today.
I love that you shared it all. And I mean, you can share as much as you want, keep going. But I can just like, I can definitely relate to a lot of your story. I didn't go to like a therapy intensive or anything, but it did take me, I mean, nearly 8 years of like unlearning what society had taught me about beauty standards, about what health looked like, and kind of like rewriting that narrative. And I think for a lot of women, it's so hard to realize that you're even stuck in like a world of disordered eating or of over exercising, because we are hearing all these lies that seem to be true. And if you're surrounded by that and that's all you know, then it's really hard to even come to the awareness of like, oh, I might be struggling. And so you can't really find healing if you never really know that you're struggling.
Yes, exactly. Like I just talk about how this is like the water we swim in, and so it's that
Yeah.
old adage of like, we don't know the water we swim in because we're so familiar. It just is part of our everyday life, and we don't realize how it is actually, I think, really taking us down. And I think I also started to take a look at like who's benefiting from this, and I started to see like the numbers behind the beauty industry, the diet industry, and the billions and billions of dollars
Billions.
that are being made. And I started to look at the role of shame, and how actually, because I started to just notice like, okay, when I watch that ad about whatever it is, this makeup because my skin is getting wrinkly, or this diet ad, or whatever it is, what is happening there is shame is purposefully being elicited. And I started to see what a sick game that was, because, shame goes to the core of who we are as humans. I just know that our deepest desire is to be known and be loved. And shame basically tells us that, we aren't worthy of belonging or love. And so it goes to that core of who God has created us to be and what he has created us to desire. And so I saw what like a hellish thing this is. I mean, that just sounds like super whatever, but over the top. But I feel like I started to see what a twisted game this was to pit us to use shame as a tool to basically make money. And yeah, I'll pause there because I could just keep going, but I'll pause.
Like nodding my head so much because totally agree. And I love that you brought up this term shame, because that is actually the slogan of my business is shameless living. Because like I'm a fitness coach. I run a studio for women called Soul. And then I have this podcast called Heart and Soul. And like the whole point behind shameless living is to untie us to those lies that were first set in the garden. I mean, it's crazy. Like in scripture, the very first thing that comes over Adam and Eve after they've fallen short is shame. It says, and they were filled with shame. So it's like, that is like the thing that the enemy uses to perpetuate us into like deeper and darker, like hamster wheels of never getting out of our own way. Like the fact that the beauty industry uses shame to make you think, oh, my skin's not good enough, I should try this skincare routine. And then the skincare routine doesn't work. Well, it's because you're this age and you should try this thing to help you look younger. And it's just perpetuating, the shame perpetuates more dollars for them. And it never ends. You just get stuck in that cycle. So to break it with living shamelessly and knowing your identity and God and who he created you to be, to have that like soul tie to your creator is what breaks it. It's what like wakes us up, really. Like we've been sleeping and we need to wake up.
Yes. And yeah, absolutely. And I think also I really love that you're spreading awareness around that too. Because I know for me, that awareness piece ended up being so key to be like, oh, wow, all of this that I'm buying into actually is not for my good. And just to kind of play that tape forward of, if you do the diet, if you do buy the X product, it is all purposefully like a moving target. And so I know it's just so interesting how deceptive these things can be, because I knew like, I grew up in a Christian home. And so I knew the answer that like, yes, like the ultimate desire of our soul is Jesus. And with that, I just looking back at my story, I just see how deceptive I think the enemy can be. And marketers. I mean, when they know psychology, it's pretty, it's kind of astounding.
Yeah, they do their research. And that's not to say that all brands that are, focused on health and wellness are bad. Like, I think it's really cool to see how the narrative is already shifting, even like publicly with brands. I think that there have been a lot of brands who have like stepped out and been like, we realize that this is what beauty standards have been, but like we want to normalize the fact that like aging happens and how do we do it gracefully, or the fact that you can want to work out every day without punishing your body, or you can want to eat healthy foods because it makes your gut feel good, not because you're trying to like look a certain way, not for aesthetics. So I think that there are a lot of brands that are really starting to shift, and that's really cool to see, but there's just so much more work that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's crazy. So when you work with, do you find that, I know this is like patient confidentiality, but do you find that a lot of women meet with you because they struggle with their body image or their identity in general?
That's a great question. So my current like caseload is more so, I would say, women struggling with more so like anxiety or life transition. And we integrate spirituality. I would say more of I more so probably like speak and talk about body image in my book related work. But that being said, I am actually trying to merge some of that work. I know that a lot of the women I speak to would say that they probably struggle with body image,
Yeah.
though. Yeah, go ahead.
And I think it's all kind of connected to like mine started with anxiety, and
Mm.
then the anxiety just like kind of got worse and worse and worse as I like acted out in these different ways. So it really is like a mental thing first. And it like all mental things can and typically do become physical. Like they affect you physically, whether that's through trying to shrink your body or through like finding some sort of coping mechanism somewhere else. So yeah, it is interesting how it is kind of all connected, like mind, body,
Oh,
spirit, all of it.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So when there's this one question that was asked in your outline that I really liked. And
Mm,
I want you to kind of just expand on this, but it said, what if your body is good?
mm,
And
mm,
I think that there's a lot of morality around foods and exercise, or like this Oreo is bad, this apple is good. And so
yeah.
I think we kind of lose what the actual, I guess, definition of good and bad is, because we think, well, I ate the Oreo, so I must be bad, or my body must be bad. Which is why I like that question, because it does make you pause and think, like, what if it actually is good,
Yeah,
even if
yeah.
you ate the Oreo? So,
Oh
what does
yeah.
that question mean to you when you ask, what if your body is good?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think I just I guess I find myself probably inviting people into the question to I find questions to be more opening than statements sometimes. My personal thought is that our bodies are so good. I think, in Genesis talks about how, humans were made and God said that it was very good. And
Very
so
good.
yes. And so I just think about like the gift of our bodies are really insane. You and I even, we were talking even about just kind of the creation of a baby before we started talking. And I like it is shocking that life can actually come together and happen. And to think about like even how many times my heart has beaten, or how many breaths I've taken since we started recording this, and how often do I actually think about that? Really not much at all. I'm trying to think more about that actually. But like the fact that each breath I get is a miracle, really.
Right.
Each moment that my life is sustained by my body is really a miracle and a gift as well. But also I think gift is or food is a gift as well. And actually how food actually nurtures and nourishes our body. Like I mentioned, I teach this course on soul well-being, and we do talk a little bit about like physical well-being and largely stress, but how food, the amino acids that we need um, comes from food, and then how that actually combines with minerals and to essentially make neurotransmitters for our brains. And so just how creation supports creation, how food supports our bodies, and how beautifully God has like knit us together, but also like given us the nutrients we need in the food that he gives us. But yeah, I think that what you're talking about in terms of morality, like moralizing food, or giving food morality, and saying some foods are good, some foods are bad. I would actually just say that that's probably a pretty disordered way of looking at food, because like you said, we often feel that we then take on the morality of the food. Like, yeah, we are good if we eat the broccoli, or we are bad if we eat the cake. Whereas actually, if we take a more holistic look at quote health, I think we can see that there is plenty of room for I would argue for the cake and the broccoli. And just I think health is a lot bigger than I think our society and diet culture and wellness culture would like us to believe. I think oftentimes when we think of health, we are faced with like a fitness influencer, and you know whatever. And so I think that that good bad food kind of moralizing that we do around food is quite unhelpful and can lead to some unhelpful relationships with food.
Right. And it is important to realize, like, if it's a whole body, spirit, mind, wellness thing, then to have the cake to celebrate someone's birthday is bringing you and that friend joy in a moment, which is beneficial to your well-being. Or if having an Oreo with your son for snack time connects you a little bit, like, food is a connector. And
Yeah.
so if it's connecting your, you know, socially connecting you, or building relationships, or even just giving you joy while you watch The Bachelor on Monday night, having like
Yeah.
two glasses of wine, like, oh my gosh. Like, that is good for your mental health, and your mental health is connected to your physical. So it really is important for us, as we're speaking, listeners. I would challenge you to this as you're speaking now about foods you eat, because you even hear things about, like, oh, I've been bad, I ate this.
Yes.
And it's like,
Yeah.
have you been bad? Like, like, to really challenge yourself in the vocabulary and the words that you use to explain or to describe what you're eating or who you are, because we say those things enough and we do start to believe them. And the fact that we're saying them out loud means that we kind of do believe them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Yes,
I don't know.
absolutely.
Be
Yeah. And I,
intentional about your words.
yes. And so, I mean, and that's what I tried to do in the book too, is I raise awareness around, these cultural messages around, beauty and diet culture, that actually feed a lot of the beliefs that we have about food in our bodies. Like, the first half of the book is actually trying to raise awareness around those things, because I think it's, you know, um, before we, underneath our words lie our beliefs. And so that's why, like, the first half of the book, I'm trying to raise awareness around some of these things that I believe are depleting life, but are so the water we swim in. And then part two of the book, trying to it actually is comprised of just like a lot of the shaping that I had to do around my relationship with food, other women, beauty, and even with God. Because, like you said, I think it's all interconnected. And so some of these things, the ways that we shame disintegrates us, can actually impact us on a holistic level. And so that's why I think I'm so passionate about the book as well, is because my hope is that we can really, like, dig into the roots of some of these unhelpful beliefs that we have because of our culture that we've been embedded in, and move toward a more hopeful future, more freed of shame, and walking with this new definition of beauty, again, that I'm defining as the life of God at work in us and among us, and how that actually opens us up to this, like, great adventure and freedom and mystery that I think we have always been invited into, but we can get so consumed and brought down by these narratives that women and our whole society have just been so like suffocating under
Yeah.
for decades.
That is such a good word. We have been suffocating. Like, we've been, like,
Yeah,
trying to catch our breath for decades, and it's generational.
yeah,
Like, it's been passed down
absolutely.
from generation to generation. And our generation does have the power to, like, break some of those ties right now. And one way that you can do that is by buying Melissa's book. If you can see this, I don't know if you can see this, but I have it. I started it. It's really good. Um, and if you want to actually fight for your worth and to know what it is, then what better way to start than with a resource that she has for you right now? How can people find your book?
Yeah, so it's available on, I mean, most major platforms. So Amazon, I think Baker Bookhouse right now has, you can go to Baker Bookhouse online. I think it's like 30% off right now. It's at, barnesandnoble.com, target.com. Most of the major retailers, I think you can order it online. Yeah.
It's so crazy to say, like, I'm an author. Like, did you ever think?
No, no. I mean, I actually always loved writing. But like, this has been such a, like, I don't know, I don't know how you've, like, heard God or felt God in your life, but, like, I've had nudges and invitations to do things, like to go to seminary, to pursue my MFT degree, marriage and family therapy degree. and things like that. And this was the largest, like I've never experienced something on my heart like this. Um, it just felt so significant, like almost like a heaviness, but like in a good way, like a responsibility way.
Mm,
Um, and like I couldn't as much as this didn't make sense, like financially and time wise and all of those things that we so often look at, I think, in the when we're trying to make decisions. um I had to keep pursuing it because it just burned inside of me. And so the fact that, yes, that it finally became a book, like it took like about 10 years for this, from the time I started writing it to it being published. It speaks of miracles to me. So like my agent sent me a picture of it in Barnes and Noble yesterday. It's the first time I've seen it in Barnes and Noble. And it just felt like such a, not like a like, oh, I'm so cool because I have this book out. It's more of like, wow, God, like you
yeah.
had to literally move mountains to get this out there. Cause I don't know if people are familiar with the publishing industry these days. It oftentimes, you have to have like this platform. And, I did not have Instagram 8 years ago. Not that I have like a huge platform now, but I really don't. But just the things that had to come together and the connections that had to be made for this to happen is um, really miraculous.
Yeah. Won't he do it? Did you find that it was also like an it further helped you heal by like writing down all these
Oh,
things?
such a good question. Absolutely. Yeah, yes, for sure. I think it was like the writing process. Um it's so interesting because I feel like it was like all of these like loops that hadn't been closed, so to speak. Like I feel like it was like, oh, I feel like that's probably connected to this other piece over here. And so it was like writing the book was like putting the puzzle together and like closing these loops, if that makes sense, or these
Yeah.
questions that I had. Um and so I really feel like God used that process to continue to shape me. And I didn't really like, it started off as more of like a cultural critique, which it is. But I was hope I won't, I think like we can tear things down, but I think it's really helpful to have something to replace it in, like more solid footing. And so I feel like that was the trajectory that I was needing, and that I needed to finish the book to see like, oh, it's about redefining beauty.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that kind of came through for sure through the writing.
So he not only used it to heal other women, but yourself as well. Like very cool.
Yeah, for
Very,
sure.
very cool. He can do anything. Okay, well, I have 4 questions that I ask every single guest. So I'm going to
Mhm.
ask you those before we sign off and then give my listeners a chance to find ways to connect with you after
Sure.
they listen to this episode. First question is, what is something that you are currently obsessed with right now?
Such a good question. I mean, and how can you not say? I mean, I'm sure everyone's like coffee, but what am I currently obsessed with? Um, the beach. Like I was telling you, where I'm in January right here, and I in Minnesota, and I am in love with the ocean. There's something about it that connects me to God and like the vastness. And so I'm obsessed with uh yeah, honestly, I'm like obsessed with looking at beach vacations. And I don't know whether that's good or bad, but that's where I'm at.
You know, if you move to Wilmington, you could have a permanent beach vacation. We live at the beach.
Are you serious? Okay, wow,
I mean, like
that's
I don't live on the water. I'm
okay.
not at that level, but we're 10 minutes from the beach. Yeah.
See, that
You
that's
got a vacation here.
that's such a dream. That really is
The
like,
water
yeah,
really is
that's
healing.
the
I feel
dream.
the same way. I literally have a wave tattooed on me because it just like I always feel God's presence by the ocean.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
okay, second question is what is something that you're really looking forward to in 2024?
Mm. Yeah, I'm really excited to I'm doing my first online group around Soul Deep Beauty, as well as gathering like a group of local women around like 20 women or so, and just kind of seeing what this message is like, kind of uh talking about these messages or these ideas, and in like in real time with
Yeah.
women, and seeing like how God meets us in community around these topics.
So are you doing that both in person with people in your community and then is there like an online one that listeners can look for or is that something you're
That's
working on?
No, that's a great question. So I'm hosting one online in February. So February 6th is the first one. It's gonna be a Tuesday group for 3 weeks in a row, and it's gonna be 1 to 2:15. And then I'm hosting a local retreat here in April. And I'm considering hosting one in Savannah, Georgia at a retreat center as well in May, perhaps. May 19th is what I'm looking at. So maybe we'll
Fingers
see if that comes to
crossed.
fruition by then. Yeah. Yes.
That's awesome. We'll have to put more information about that in the show notes because I know some of our listeners probably would love to learn more about that. Okay. Third question is, what's something that you really love about yourself right now?
Mm. Oh, that is a really good question. Um, what is something I love about myself? I think is honestly like this is like this is making me look at this in a positive light. I think I always am searching for like or digging for um like where God's invitation is next. And I think part of me is like gets irritated with that part of myself, but I love your how you're asking this. Um I think that's a beautiful thing. I think that there's adventure in that, and I
Yeah.
think that that feels I appreciate that.
There's also a lot of hope in that, like
Yeah.
looking towards what God has for you next.
Yeah.
There's hope in that. Um,
Yes.
that is a cool trait and one that's never been answered before on the podcast. So
Mm, mm,
great answer. Okay, last question is if you could leave my listeners with a little post-it note of
mm.
encouragement that they can put on their mirror or on their computer today, something short and sweet to leave them with some love, what would that be?
Yeah, I maybe I don't know, this is an odd one, but just what if beauty isn't like the size or the shape of your body or like your aesthetic appeal up as according to cultural standards. But I guess I would invite listeners instead to a new definition of beauty. Again, it's the life of God at work in us and among us. And what would it look like to have our eyes and our hearts open to how God is at work in within you and all around you, like even now?
Mm, love that. What a good question to end on. Y'all be thinking on that. Take some time to pause after you tune out of this podcast and really be thinking about what that would look like for you to see God in and through you. Um, Melissa, where can my listeners connect with you or how?
Yeah. Yeah. So on Instagram, I'm at melissa.louise.johnson as well as at impossible.beauty. And then my website is impossible-beauty.com. And then I also have a Facebook page. It's longer. It's like Impossible Beauty blog and podcast or something like that. So, and then the book as well. Like I, I don't mean this as like a cheesy marketing scheme. I just truly, like I said, this message is something that is like has been like forged in my heart, and I just really would invite women to this journey with me of redefining beauty. And I think part of that can be kind of diving into the messages in the book that I really feel so passionate about.
Yes. Buy the book. We'll put that link in the show notes and also all the ways to follow and connect with Melissa. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today
Thank you so much.
and for sharing your story. Listeners, I will talk to you next week. Bye.